Conduct Authority to treat us reasonably.
My Lords, I welcome the three new peers and their thought-provoking contributions so far to this crucial bill. I want to focus on one fairly narrow but I think important consequence of an increasingly cashless society, and that is that a handful of mainly US tech giants now have unprecedented power over the public square. Consider how any civil society organisation has to operate today. Consumer campaigns, pressure groups, NGOs, the third sector, all will be dependent on payment processes such as US fintech PayPal to operate, to organise online payments for goods, services, events, to receive membership fees, donations, etc. So can you imagine if these digital corporates took it upon themselves to freeze assets and suspend accounts with no notice or explanation, or because some big tech apparatchik seemingly disapproved of the aims of such organisations? Surely such censorious demonetisation would be a threat to democracy. Yet this is not some dystopian future, but is happening now. So I urge the government to use this bill to protect civil society organisations' ability to conduct basic commerce regardless of their political views. My Lords will remember the media coverage of events in September last year when PayPal deplatformed a number of UK organisations. The Free Speech Union, and I declare an interest on the advisory board, the Daily Sceptic, Law and Fiction, and Us for Them, an advocacy group set up by mums who oppose school closures during lockdown. Suddenly, these organisations had no way to process membership, access their own funds, no ability to raise money, were made to feel like criminals, and all their processing services were just switched off abruptly, risking their whole financial viability. As Toby Young, who heads up two of the targeted organisations, explained at the time, PayPal software was embedded in all our payment systems, so the sudden closure of our accounts was an existential threat. Indeed, even PayPal's co-founder Peter Thiel told the Free Press in December, if the online form of your monies is frozen, that's like destroying people economically, limiting their ability to exercise their political voice. Such financial censorship reminded me of when the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau froze the Freedom Convoy protesters' bank accounts last February. That was shocking, but at least it was clearly a political act. The problem when payment process organisations defund based on content is they're often evasive and opaque about who is targeted and why. PayPal gave contradictory and vague explanations last September, initially citing its acceptable use policy associated with criminality and hate speech, then later telling The Times that the accounts were guilty of misinformation about vaccines. Few were convinced. The MP Miriam Cates told the other place, quote, "It's hard to avoid interpreting PayPal's action as anything other than an orchestrated, politically motivated move to restrict certain views in the UK, or in the FSU's case, even defending those expressing such legal but dissenting views." After a high-profile press coverage and members from both houses, across parties and none, causing a fuss, PayPal eventually backed down, reinstated the accounts and denied that there was any political interference. But I don't think there's any room for complacency. When MP Sally Hart proposed an amendment to this very bill in the other place, seeking to legally prevent financial service providers refusing to provide services if related to the exercise of the right to free speech, the Minister, Andrew Giffen, gave a robustly positive response. He stated that the government respected, quote, "the balance of rights between users and service providers' obligations, whether the Free Speech Union, the trade union movement, or law-abiding environmental movements, or anyone else expressing lawful views." However, the Minister seemed rather reluctant to agree with the need for primary legislative change and stated that the PayPal incident didn't represent a wider pattern. I beg to disagree. We need to look at what's happened in the US over recent years and think it might happen here, where big tech companies regularly use defunding to regulate speech. So much so that in June 2021, a large coalition of US civil liberties groups wrote to PayPal and its subsidiary Venmo, asking for transparency, due process and clarity behind its escalating practice of economic limitations of multiple accounts on as varied as WikiLeaks, WikiLeaks to the New Media Canada's payment to submit an article about Syrian refugees for an award. The coalition, comprising eminent organisations such as Article 19, the ACLU, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, never even got a reply from PayPal. Also, less high-profile instances of deplatforming dissenting views are, for example, happening in the UK, with Patreon, Crowd Justice and GoFundMe affecting our citizens. And what's more, the majority of major payment providers grant themselves the right to block accounts of those whose views clash with Silicon Valley's increasingly ideological corporate values. So I intend to put in an amendment to say that while I understand that private companies have a right to choose who they do business with and should be vigilant about fraud and illegal transactions, they should never discriminate on the basis of an organisation's political, philosophical or religious beliefs. And this bill might be a place where we can put it right.
My Lords, firstly I declare an interest as consultant